All of these scary mysteries are unsolved cases involving creepy people who are still at large. Families and investigators hope the unknown individuals responsible come forward to confess their notorious crimes, so the frightful mystery can finally be solved. Number 5. The scary mystery of Diane and Hugh Harlan is a strange but true story that still needs explaining decades later. Diane's missing body was found on a beach a short distance from her home, 2 weeks after she was last seen alive. 4 years later, her husband mysteriously vanished without a trace. The Harlans lived in Morro Bay, California in the 1980s. As a self-employed fisherman, Hugh was considered unusual but was friendly enough. Diane wasn't very sociable and was known locally as the dog lady, because she reportedly cared more deeply about her dogs than any human. When Diane didn't return home from walking her dogs on October 2nd, 1982, Hugh didn't think it was a scary mystery at first. Even when the dogs had come back by themselves, he still didn't worry. She was known to disappear for days at a time, and they had plenty of arguments in the past, like the time she'd fed him dog food casserole for dinner. On October 13th, he was filled with true horror when the body of a woman was found on the beach beneath a strand of trees. The remains were in such bad condition that the woman couldn't be identified at first. 2 bracelets were also found nearby that Hugh recognized as Diane's. Found at the crime scene was a dog leash that investigators believed had been used to take the woman's life. Hugh was one of the first people criminally questioned in this creepy mystery, and he looked even more suspicious when he told investigators that the dogs had returned without their leashes, and then mysteriously changed his story to saying they'd returned without them. If this strange story is true, then he didn't believe Diane's passing was the result of foul play, because she often forgets her aneurysm medication, a medical emergency he suspected had most likely claimed her life. Police believed Hugh knew more about what happened to her than he was willing to let on, and a third individual was possibly responsible, a person so scary that Hugh was too intimidated to tell criminal investigators the truth. 4 years later, Hugh mysteriously vanished without a trace on November 1st of 1986, when he went to pick up some tools from a friend. He was traveling 27 miles away for a 2-day construction job. His friend watched him leave that evening in his pickup truck that was found abandoned a few days later, its hood up and doors locked. Inside the car were Hugh's personal belongings. Nearby were the keys. Mysteriously, the fuel line had been removed completely. No trace of Hugh was ever found, and his disappearance baffles investigators to this day. Some in the true crime community suspect Hugh was responsible for Diane's passing, and that he had fled out of fear that the police were closing in on him. Others believe his life had been taken by the same creepy unknown person who had attacked Diane. The true story behind this horrifying crime has never been solved. Number 4. It was Christmas of 1971 when 2 photographers found the body of Celia Beth Van Zanten in McHugh Creek. Beth was 18 years old and had been living in South Anchorage with her 3 brothers and cousin Greg, who she didn't get along with. On December 2nd, 3 days prior, she spent the day shopping with her mother, aunt, and another cousin before returning home. Unaware of the real-life horror story to come, Beth watched a movie with her 2 brothers while she waited for Greg to pick her up for a babysitting job. Between 8:30 and 8:45 p.m., she decided to go to the store to get some soda. She asked her brothers to tell Greg to wait for her if he arrived first. He never did, and what happened to Beth from there remains a scary unsolved mystery. Greg became the person for criminal investigators to suspect. He told police detectives he'd spent the day with a friend. If his story was true, then he waited for 3 minutes at the house for Beth, and then left without her. The next lead came when police were approached by an 18-year-old street worker who had been kidnapped and attacked a few days before Beth disappeared. The woman told police she'd been driven to a motel by a creepy mystery person who would claim to have taken the lives of other women. This very scary person would be identified as Robert Hansen, a notorious individual who went on to become one of Alaska's most disturbing criminals, responsible for the lives of 20 women. He had been arrested for the attempted abduction of a woman prior to this crime story, and it seemed possible to detectives he was involved in this case too. Hansen had an alibi for the night Beth lost her life, but he also claimed to have alibis for other crimes he was later found guilty of, and so he could be responsible for what happened to Beth too. The third criminal suspect was a man named Gary Zeiger. Zeiger was also responsible for taking the lives of a number of people, and was the main suspect in another crime very similar to Beth's, not too far from where Beth's body was found only a few months later. Aside from this circumstantial evidence, there doesn't appear to be any significant clues tying him to Beth's unsolved case. Beth's body was found in the snow on Christmas, partially disrobed, hands behind her back with speaker wire. Case investigators later determined that she'd been driven to a parking lot and managed to escape, only to fall off a ledge and freeze. Whoever did this to her had driven around and left after they were unable to find her. Without a criminal confession, investigators may never discover the scary person responsible, a person who could still be on the loose. Number 3. Mary Sherman was a brilliant doctor and medical researcher who was 51 years old and a widower. On July 21, 1964, emergency workers called to an apartment fire in New Orleans, Louisiana, discovered her remains in a horrifying mystery they can still not explain. Red stains on the walls indicated a dark and disturbing crime scene had taken place. It was clear to case investigators from her missing arm that someone had attacked the doctor and set her bedroom ablaze in an attempt to destroy the evidence. When police spoke to Mary's coworkers, they suggested to look for a patient or else one of the doctors that worked under Mary. Another doctor received a mysterious phone call not long after the crime, saying that she would be next, but this lead was not deemed serious enough for a major investigation. Detectives believed this was likely a crime of passion by a woman who Mary was involved with. However, there were other possible criminal suspects as well. Juan Valdez, one of Mary's neighbors at the apartment building, was the person to contact police investigators. Juan was considered suspicious because investigators learned that he was seen carrying odd packages and could be heard flushing the toilet 20 times in a row in the middle of the night. Police suspected these packages could be from unrelated dealings with the black market, rather than anything related to what happened to Mary Sherman. Perhaps the strangest case theories alleged that the doctor was doing research for a top-secret science project involving a 5 million volt particle accelerator. On the night of her passing, according to this story, something had gone wrong with a weird science experiment that caused a fire. Her science coworkers then staged the crime to cover up the true nature of the project. As with all of the other case theories, nothing has been proven, and the crime case is not solved. Number 2. The scary mystery of Dorothy Miller remains the oldest cold case in the city of Burlington, Iowa. Dorothy Miller was 48 years old when she lost her life in 1969. She was a successful realtor and loving grandmother when she received a business call from a man calling himself Robert Clark, who wanted to buy a house. On the evening of August 15th, she and her husband Fred picked up Robert Clark and took him to a property for sale at 118 Grand Street. The house showing went well, and a few days later, Dorothy got another call from Robert, who wanted to make an appointment to take house photos to show his wife. They agreed to another meeting on August 18th. Fred was working, so at 7 p.m. she went without him. As a trucker with an early shift, Fred went to bed at 8:30 p.m. To his surprise, he woke up to an empty bed at 5:30 a.m. the next morning. Concerned that Dorothy was not home, he went with his daughter to 118 Grand Street, only to find Dorothy's car outside with the key in the ignition. Police were called to the scene and found Dorothy in the upstairs closet of the property. a brick and a blade had been used on her. Dorothy's friends and family were ruled out as criminal suspects. It seemed certain a stranger was behind the crime, but little evidence was found at the crime scene. Witnesses had seen Dorothy go into the house with a mystery man who's believed to have come into town with a carnival and left not long after committing the crime. Police believed what had happened to Dorothy Miller was planned, and he wanted to take Dorothy's life during the first visit, but was put off by Fred being there. Police believed it to be true that the person responsible most likely went on to commit more crimes in other parts of the country. The case went cold, but every new detective in Burlington examines the Dorothy Miller mystery when they begin their job, in case anything was missed. There have been no new leads since the initial investigation, and the creepy true crime case remains an unsolved mystery. Number 1. The unsolved disappearance of Susan Swindell is a strange and scary missing person case of true horror. Detectives believe the creepy person responsible for what happened to Susan was expecting her to have car troubles on January 19, 1988, and drove off with her to an unknown destination. 19-year-old Susan lived with her mother and younger sister in Minnesota. The busy teenager worked part-time jobs 6 miles away from home, and on the day of her disappearance, she was working at a Kmart in the mall. She previously had plans to meet up with an ex-boyfriend after her shift, but a heavy blizzard caused him to cancel. Instead, she spoke to her mother on the phone and said she was coming straight home afterward to watch movies with her mother and sister. Before she left work at 9 p.m., she changed out of her red pantsuit that she'd been wearing and into a sweater and a short skirt. It didn't suit the weather at all, but she would be driving the next 6 miles home and didn't think it was a problem. When Susan hadn't returned home by 11 p.m., her mother contacted police. She thought Susan might not have made it home because of the blizzard conditions. An officer found her 1975 Oldsmobile Cutlass at a Circle K gas station about a mile from her home. Her glasses, wallet, and other belongings were inside, but she was missing. The local gas station was closed at this point, and there were no witnesses to ask what had happened. The scary mystery still was unsolved by sunrise, but by then they had a new lead. The gas station worker from the night before claimed to have been asked by Susan if she could leave her vehicle there overnight, and then another dirty light color car pulled up alongside her. The man driving was described as having shoulder-length sandy brown hair and a well-built physique. Susan got into his car and they headed west on Highway 5. Upon hearing this story, crime investigators thought she had simply run away from home. They didn't perform a forensic examination of her car, and the case went cold until Susan's mother took the car to a mechanic for problems overheating, and the mechanic discovered that the drain plug in the radiator had been loosened as if intentionally sabotaged. Police at this point began investigating the case again with a new criminal angle. Another strange development in this unsolved mystery came a week later. Susan's younger sister came home from school to find the spare key to the house had been moved. There was a sweet, smoky smell inside the house and new dirty dishes. She and her mother searched the house and discovered the clothing Susan had been wearing at work before she disappeared, rolled up into a ball and pushed under her bed. None of her other belongings had been taken. If Susan was a runaway who was returning home for a meal and supplies, then she should have taken something with her. The mysterious disappearance of Susan remains an unsolved missing person case, though police have now begun to suspect foul play was involved. A few tips have been called in over the years, but none have led to this scary mystery being solved. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.